The broadcast pierced every channel across the Calthera compact on a frequency that had been officially silent since before most of their officers were born. The compact monitored 43,000 dormant military frequencies as a matter of protocol. Most belonged to extinct species, some to dissolved nations, a handful to individuals whose service records stretched back to when the galaxy's borders looked entirely different. Frequency Delta 9 Thorn had belonged to Captain Oswin Harthe, human, registered to the Central Systems Navy. His file carried the notation inactive for 40 years. Not deceased, not discharged, inactive. The distinction mattered in human administrative law, though no other species understood why. The compact's intelligence analysts had stopped monitoring the frequency entirely after the first decade. There was no strategic value in tracking ghosts. Until last Tuesday, when Delta 9 Thorn transmitted a single word in outdated naval code, complete. Diplomatic liaison Torvin Quist took the report personally. He'd written his dissertation on human military bureaucracy, the labyrinthine systems that kept expired orders technically enforceable for generations. He'd called it institutional neurosis. Now he stood in the archive chamber, staring at the decoded transmission log. "Pull Captain Harthe's original deployment order," he told the archivist. The document materialized, dated 73 years prior. Objective: secure and stabilize outpost Viridian 7 against Talrex incursion. Hold position until relief or strategic reassessment. The war with the Talrex had ended 68 years ago. The compact had absorbed both territories. Viridian 7 had been renamed, terraformed, and colonized by 3 different species. It was now a mining hub called Thesser's Reach, with a population of 4 million. "The relief order," Quist said slowly. "Was it ever sent?" The archivist searched. Minutes passed. No record exists. They found Harthe on Thesser's Reach, not in a settlement, not in any listed dwelling. He was living in the original outpost structure, buried beneath 200 meters of industrial excavation. The mining crews had drilled past it for decades without noticing the active power signature masked by geological interference. When compact security descended, Harthe was sitting at a functioning console 73 years old, monitoring phantom supply lines that no longer existed, tracking enemy positions for a nation that had been dead for generations. No, he looked up when they entered. His face carried the deep lines of extended lifespan treatments, pushed far past their intended duration. His uniform was patched, reinforced, rebuilt with materials that shouldn't have been compatible. "Relief detail?" he asked. "Captain Harthe," Quist said carefully. "The war is over. It's been over for... I know." Harthe's voice was steady. Too steady. "I've had satellite access for 30 years. I know about the treaties, the integration, the mining operations topside. Then why? I never received stand-down authorization." Harthe gestured to his console. "My orders were to hold position until relief or strategic reassessment. Neither occurred." Quist spent 6 days reconstructing the command chain. What he found wasn't a mystery. It was worse. It was administrative erosion. The relief order had been drafted, approved, transmitted, but Outpost Viridian 7's comm relay had been destroyed in the final Talrex bombardment, 20 minutes before the order went out. The message bounced, filed under errors, low priority. The war ended. Bureaucracies merged. The error log was never reviewed. Harthe hadn't been abandoned by malice. He'd been abandoned by paperwork. But that wasn't the part that made Quist's hands shake. Harthe's mission had included a secondary objective, buried in classified annexes. If Viridian 7 falls and cannot be recovered, secure geological survey data from Substrata Mining Complex Delta. Data contains strategic resource mapping critical to post-war reconstruction. The data had never been retrieved. The Strategic Command assumed Viridian 7's loss meant the data was lost. but Harthe had spent 40 years excavating by hand, repairing pre-collapse mining equipment, mapping substrata corridors, locating the original survey vault, bypassing security that predated modern encryption, and last week, he'd cracked it. He'd transmitted the data. The Compact's resource analysts were still processing the intelligence windfall, rare Earth deposits, viable colony sites, energy reserves that would reshape territorial negotiations for the next century. One human, following 73-year-old orders, had just rewritten the geological map of the entire sector. The formal decommissioning ceremony took place on Thesser's Reach. They offered Harthe honors, recognition, reparations. He declined all of it except one request. He wanted the original outpost preserved as a monument, not to himself, to the principal. Somebody gave those orders believing they mattered, Harthe said. I stayed because walking away would have meant they didn't. When they finally transmitted the official relief authorization, Harthe stood at attention in that ancient, patched uniform and saluted a flag that no longer flew anywhere in the galaxy. The Compact's officers from a dozen species returned the salute. Nobody spoke about the absurdity. Nobody questioned the cost. In that moment, they understood something that didn't translate into policy or doctrine. Humans measured duty by a clock that didn't stop when wars ended or nations fell. They measured it by the promise itself, untethered from context or consequence. Harthe accepted retirement. He moved to a coastal settlement on a human colony world, where he finally stopped checking long-range sensors and monitoring dead frequencies. But across Compact space, a quiet institutional shift occurred. Military academies began teaching Harthe's case in ethics courses, not as a cautionary tale, but as a question. What do you owe to an order when the nation that gave it no longer exists? The Compact never reached consensus. Humans, universally, already knew the answer. The outpost still stands beneath Thesser's Reach, empty now except for the console Harthe left running. Its screen displays a single line, updating once per day. Position held. Relief acknowledged. Mission complete.